explain my absence for the past 2 weeks. I took a week off last week from work, and I was at the gym Sunday before the week even started, and I dropped my phone in the gym, cracked the screen, didn't work. So insurance company took 2 weeks to get a phone back to me. That's why it took so long for me to get back on social media. But anyway, we're back at it. I've got a little bit of some content here that I can make a pretty decent YouTube video out of. Might be helpful to some of you guys. But to start, I wanted to show you what I did 2 weeks ago when I was home. We finally got my shed done here. Built this driveway last year, a while ago. But finally got the shed and the lean-to, which I've got a tractor parked in there. Come here, I'll show you. But we finally got a lean-to set up here so I can park my grandpa's tractor underneath. Keep it dry, keep it out of the rain. I'm going to try to rebuild the carburetor here. And then we finally got the rest of the shed done. I do have finally a workbench in here, so I actually have somewhat of a shop. When you're broke like me, you can't afford an air-conditioned concrete floor shop that Daddy paid for, so this is what I've got to work with. So about 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, on a weekend, I went to Springfield. Somebody threw a truck meet. I went up there and hang out with a bunch of people. Parked my truck at the show, left my truck running because I had my lights on. I didn't want to kill the battery, and I noticed that I had a bunch of fuel all over my frame in here, and it wasn't leaking real bad, but it looked like my air conditioning was running, but it was fuel. Came home, looked at it. It's obviously the fuel pump or whatever up here on the top of the motor where the primer is, the self primer and all that stuff. I believe it's leaking out of the self primer, but I'm not sure. I think it's probably just a bad gasket or a rubber O-ring or something like that. So I got a rebuild kit for the fuel pump, and we're going to kind of rebuild that today. That's what we're going to do for this. If that doesn't work, I'm just going to delete it because I do have a fast fuel system on this truck, and I don't really need that in there. It's just nice to have that self primer. Alright, so as you guys can see, we have fuel all over the top of this thing, and it's just covered the entire filter running down onto the frame down below. But I wanted to show you guys this. It is dry on top of this, triangular plate that has the self primer on it. It is dry on top of that. It seems like the fuel's coming out from underneath that. So I almost think it's a rubber seal in there, but we do have a rebuild kit for this entire thing, so we're just going to take the whole thing out, replace every seal on it, and then put it back. So the first thing we're going to do is you're going to unhook this sensor that goes into the bottom of your fuel filter. It just clips out so that we can take the fuel filter out. Then we're going to go ahead and take this right off. That comes right off. And take this off. And we're going to get nasty diesel all over my nice powder. Maybe not. So just make sure that when you take this out, this rubber O-ring on top of your fuel filter is still there and it didn't stick up underneath the truck. I'm not going to be replacing this because it's still fairly new, so I'm just going to put it back in when I'm done. Make sure you don't get it dirty or anything. To take this out, we're going to have to get rid of or unclamp these little hose clamps here on the inlet and outlet for the fuel pump, and undo these two bolts here in the back to take the whole pump out. Don't forget your little, I'm not even sure what that's for, but unclamp that, and your ground is behind this screw here. So make sure you unscrew that, pull your ground out before you pull this out so you don't rip your wires out. Alright, so we got this out of here. I showed you guys to unplug this before, but the ground is still behind this screw here, so I'm just going to take that screw out real quick. Careful not to lose this screw and that ground. Will slide right out of there. It was just a connection. Don't forget to hook that back up when you're done. It is way too hot for this. Way too hot. So we have the top part of our fuel pump off. This rebuild kit came with a little handy dandy instruction paper, so I'm going to stick that right up here. Just kind of keep an eye on it so I know what I'm doing. I'm not skipping anything. Here's our rubber seals. They give us replacement screws for these little screws that go on the top of this right here. I guess I'll just go ahead and replace them since new is always better. So okay. First it says to go ahead and take this out. 12mm wrench to take your bleeder screw out. Your bleeder screw is plastic, That's why I didn't want to use a screwdriver, because somebody's already kind of messed it up right there. It's better to use a socket on that. It's 12mm. It has a little rubber seal on it, but they gave me an entire new bleeder screw with the seal already on it. So we're just going to go ahead, put that brand new one just right back in. Tighten her down. Remember, it's plastic. You don't want to over tighten it, but you don't want it leaking. And also remember, after we go to put this back on, I'll show you guys, don't tighten this down too much right now. We're going to be taking that back off to bleed out the air, to get fuel back up in the line. So next we're going to move to the plunger seals. This part just comes right off. Take the metal piece off the top of that. This is probably honestly my problem. As you can see, this bottom seal kind of angles out. Well, the top one is supposed to angle out too at the top, and it's not. It's pretty flat. That could be the reason why it's leaking. Try not to, I don't know if this really matters or not, but I would imagine you don't want to damage this plastic if you can, so don't be gouging it and breaking it and stuff when you're pulling those out. Be gentle. We'll set these aside. Those are the old ones. And I'll go ahead and I'll stick my new ones on. Remember, this is what the bottom side of the ring looks like, and this is the top. You want that flare. You want that flare that's on the bottom one to stick out the bottom like that. Like you can see, it flares out toward the bottom of it. This one, you're going to flip the complete opposite way, and you want it to flare out toward the top. So when you stick it on there, the top seal is going to stick a little at first. Just push it all the way down and then pull it back up just slightly. Don't pull it back off. Next, we're going to replace this little O-ring right here. I'm just going to go ahead and coat it with diesel that's already on my fingers, so it's not sticking anything. So when I showed you guys before, this is what they're showing me on my instructions. That ground wire that was under, it was connected, it was between here and these, like this. They're saying the correct installation is to actually be on top of the metal here, which makes sense, and that might possibly have something to do why it was leaking. But that's the way it's been since I've had the truck, so I don't really think that was the reason. It might have caused it over time, but obviously they're showing me that in the instructions here. Just a side note so you guys remember to do that. Okay, so now we're going to flip this over, and we're going to undo these two screws here in the bottom. Remember, this little clear ball is going to go on top of that spring. Just remember that. Okay, so that little O-ring just actually came off of this plastic piece here. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that. The next one is going to be this one here, which the factory one is orange and our replacement is black, but they're both rubber, so I imagine they'll work. Now that that's all done, we're going to put everything back together. Take this little ceramic ball or whatever it is here, put it back on top of your spring, line that up, next, what we're going to do, take your spring, put it back in there. We're going to put this thing back on. Yeah, buddy. A little bit of tension there. We're going to use our new screws that we got. I just bought this little rebuild kit from O'Reilly's. I'm sure you can probably get them at AutoZone or Napa or any automotive store. Now this is done. This entire thing is completely rebuilt. Time to go back in the truck. Before I get in here, I'm going to connect the hoses back to this before I bolt it back up to the engine block, just because I think it'll be easier to get the hoses on trying to work right here than it would be to try to be up top, or no matter how I do it. It'd just be easier to do it when it's not bolted up. So we're going to go ahead and put those hoses on here and then get this thing bolted onto the engine block. I do not recommend this on a 100+ degree day. You're gonna take your fuel filter back out. Once again, make sure your rubber O-ring is in there, still connected. I never took this off. There's no reason to leave that alone. Got our hand tight. I think I'm just gonna go with that. My hands didn't slip too bad. Don't forget to hook your sensor up that's hanging here from the bottom of the fuel filter. Plug it back in. Remember, we didn't tighten our splitter screw down all the way for a reason before. You're going to go ahead and loosen that up a little bit, just enough so that it's not sealed and fuel can get by. And then we're going to pump. You can use your hand pump primer or whatever you want to call it. And you're going to watch your bleeder screw until you start to see fuel come out of it. Once you get a steady flow, every time when you push down and fuel comes out as you're pushing down, it's not just little bubbles. Then go ahead and tighten it back up. You know you got fuel all the way through your lines, got the lines clear to the air. I got bubbles. Okay, now I got pretty good flow of fuel. Let's start it up and see if it leaks. So as you can see, looks like it's fixed. We should be done with that. I'm a happy camper. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about anything that I did that I didn't necessarily cover, just shoot me a question in the comments. I'd be glad to answer it for you. Anyway, it's hot out. I'm gonna go inside. I'm gonna take a shower and I'm gonna sit in the AC for a little bit because it is too hot to be outside.